Crystal Palace 1, Manchester City 0. An amazing FA Cup final afternoon for Crystal Palace. And that's exactly how the game was, It felt like a proper FA Cup final. Crystal Palace, the underdogs, granted they're still a Premier League team, but they are the underdogs coming into this match. They had to ride their luck, they had to defend well, they had to produce in big moments. All things that you have to do in a cup final, and all things that Crystal Palace did amazingly. Now, I will just say, this video might be a little bit weird because we are going to sit and talk about Crystal Palace winning the match 1-0, despite getting largely dominated. Manchester City had all of the possession, they had all of the chances created, and pretty much all of the expected goals as well, yet Crystal Palace went on to win. But I'm sure you guys will understand, we are going to do a lot of focus on Manchester City in possession because they had so much of the ball. We're going to talk about Crystal Palace defending, and then we are going to talk about their big moment to score the winning goal. But first off, City, because it is the right place to start. Manchester City on the ball, how were they looking to play? Well, largely they were building in more of a back three, with Akanji, Diaz and Gvardiol playing across the defensive line. We then saw O'Reilly initially starting at left back and moving into midfield, almost alongside Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne, and we'll come back to that in a second. So we've got O'Reilly here, Bernardo Silva in moments, sort of like a holding midfielder, which is a bit of a weird decision. You've then got Savinho and Doku on the two wings, and Haaland and Marmoush up front. And you can see that it almost looks a little bit like a 3-5-2 shape, which I haven't seen a lot of Manchester City recently, but was this Pep just overthinking the final a little bit? He's done it in the past, and I personally haven't seen them use this shape recently, although correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of how City look to approach the game, they look to approach it in very Manchester City-esque fashion, overloading the middle of the pitch, trying to draw the opposition in, and then trying to kind of prod and poke the wide areas before then looking to deliver into the penalty area. And they did that pretty well for large parts of the game. You see, because Manchester City have got O'Reilly, Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne all really central, what Crystal Palace have to do is come central to try and stop them, right? Because if you give De Bruyne time on the ball, you're in trouble because Kevin De Bruyne's pretty good. So what Crystal Palace have to do is they have to narrow off their structure. You can see it here. Crystal Palace, the four across the middle of the pitch, playing incredibly close to each other. What this means for City, though, is that they now have really easy access from Gvardiol on the left or Akanji on the right into the feet of their two wingers. So Doku on the left-hand side and Savinho on the right-hand side. This was a big theme of this football match. The Manchester City wingers picking the ball up in the wide areas and looking to take their man on. You can see the number of dribbles that they attempted in this game. You can see them in situations like this and this and this. It was constant. Manchester City constantly 1 versus 1 in these wide zones. Although actually not always 1v1, because Crystal Palace worked incredibly hard out of possession. This was a team that came here to defend, and that's not a criticism of Crystal Palace. Understand what you are as a team, understand what your strengths are, stick together, play close to each other, restrict the gaps for Manchester City to work in. These are all things that Crystal Palace look to do. So yes, initially Savinho might be 1v1 up against Mitchell, but someone like Eze is going to do his job to get back in and help him out in this position here. And also the same from Sarr on the other side, dropping deeper to try and help out his wing-back. Crystal Palace worked so incredibly hard to try and stop their wing-backs being too exposed in these positions. And when they were exposed, they felt that they could deal with the ball into the box. However, whilst we are praising Crystal Palace here, they did do well defensively, there was just one problem that they had. And that was, when you drop so many players deep, you give Manchester City a lot of time in some really dangerous positions. So let's say Sarr drops in deep to help out his wing-back up against Doku, and Eze does something similar on this side with Mitchell against Savinho. It opens up two large gaps, which you guys have probably noticed by now. We're talking about this gap here, which is potentially a bit of a problem, and also this gap here. So what City would look to do is move the ball down the right-hand side, give the ball to the winger. The winger's going to carry the ball forward. He's going to draw the attention of two Crystal Palace defenders, and then he's going to roll the ball back into this zone here for Kevin De Bruyne on this side. And on the other side, it could be O'Reilly, it could be Bernardo Silva, sometimes it was Gvardiol. These were the zones that City were looking to attack. You can see it in this clip here. This is the area Manchester City are creating from, and also in this situation here. And also, if you look at their crosses in this game, this is pretty much the zone that they were looking to create from. In terms of how Crystal Palace dealt with that, well, it was a combination of two things. It was ridiculous box defence, and what we mean by that is the centre-backs basically dealing with pretty much everything that came into the penalty area. You can see the defensive action zones for Crystal Palace in this game, actually quite funny seeing so many defensive actions in the penalty area. This was backs to the wall for large parts of the game from Crystal Palace, but they did it absolutely brilliantly. And any time they didn't do it brilliantly, they had a man in goal going by the name of Dean Henderson. And I thought today I would even put the cap on to pay tribute to that Dean Henderson performance, because he was amazing, but also really not convincing at the same time. You know, should he have been sent off for this? I'm not sure, but the penalty save and other saves were just amazing in this game. And I think Manchester City, I think for them it was one of those days where they could have played that game for another 2 hours, and I just don't think they would have found a way through Crystal Palace, because Palace defended brilliantly, bodies on the line defending, and when that didn't work, Dean Henderson was there. So it's now finally time to talk about the winners of this match, Crystal Palace, and what they look to do on the ball. Although if you have noticed the length of this video, you may have clocked already that this is going to be slightly brief. And Crystal Palace fans, please don't attack me. I'm sure you can understand why. Crystal Palace didn't have much of the ball in this game. And again, it's not a criticism, it's just a different way of playing football. But the important thing for Palace was the idea that they were trying to use. You know, whilst they didn't have a lot of the ball, when they did have the ball, the game plan felt very, very, very obvious. What Crystal Palace were looking to do was use Dean Henderson in the back four. So we would see the two wing backs, Mitchell and Munoz, put a little bit higher, and Dean Henderson is going to make a back four with the back three in front of him. So the three centre-backs are going to split either side of Dean Henderson, and he's going to go and play as an extra centre-back, which for me is a good thing to do when you are using the back three. Glasner deserves credit for this. He's been doing it a lot this season. So Dean Henderson almost becomes like a left-sided centre-back when you're trying to play out from the back. And you drop around like this. So Richard goes to the right-hand side, and he looks more like a right-back now, and Guehi on the left now looks like a left-back. So Crystal Palace move into this shape. And what I'm talking about in terms of the Palace idea, the intention, I think they always wanted to play the first ball short because they felt that that would draw City onto them, and then they wanted to go long over the top to attack the spaces that they have just created. And, you know, I think using Dean Henderson is crucial to that because he's almost an extra outfielder, which draws more City players forward. So because Crystal Palace initially are playing the ball short, Manchester City feel that this is the time for them to go and press. So Doku's going to come high. We could see, you know, Bernardo, De Bruyne. O'Reilly was a really interesting one as well because Munoz would drop deep on the right-hand side, the right wing-back for Crystal Palace, and O'Reilly would sort of follow him into these positions. But you can see this is when you start to open up spaces. So Palace were playing the ball short initially, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't think they actually had any interest in playing with the ball in these positions. They were just trying to trick Manchester City into playing the game that Palace wanted to play. And it worked, to be honest. It worked. Palace regularly from these positions would play the ball short initially, maybe one, sometimes two passes short. But then after that, they're going to go long up to someone like Mateta, who is an amazing target striker, uses his body incredibly well. He is so difficult for centre-backs to play against. He must be an absolute nightmare to try and defend against. But what he does is he brings other people into the game, and then Crystal Palace can attack the space that they have just created for themselves. And of course, the best example of this, although there were a few, the best example has to be the goal. Dean Henderson is almost like a centre-back with the back three here. This is almost now a back four in this position, because you can see Richards on the ball, pretty much playing as a right-back over in this position. And what it does is it draws Manchester City onto them. But what Crystal Palace are going to do is not actually try and play with the ball there. They want to go long. But you can see the fact that they played the ball short initially is still important because you can see O'Reilly at the bottom of the picture there, drawn higher. If Crystal Palace had, you know, given Dean Henderson the ball from the goal kick, pushed all the players forward and just sent it long straight away, O'Reilly would be in a much more defensive position. So the reason that Crystal Palace are playing it shorter initially is to drag Manchester City onto them to then go into that space in behind. And they did this brilliantly. The long ball is amazing, and Mateta, what a striker this man has been in the past 18 months now. Just unbelievable. Such a good outlet striker. You can put the ball up towards him, and a lot of the time, he's going to make it stick. And it was not an easy shift for him, you know, in this game. He did a lot of defensive work, a lot of work behind the ball, which isn't normally what strikers like to do, but Mateta didn't look like he was complaining once. He just got on with the job, really. And then after that, you do just have to question this decision from Pep Guardiola. Because Palace are an amazing team when they are attacking space. And Guardiola put De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva in a double pivot to try and deal with it. Now, this isn't a proper transitioning situation. It is long from a goal kick. But I just feel that De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva are probably not the ideal two to try and break up a move in this position. And it hurts Crystal Palace. It hurts Manchester City because Crystal Palace are able to pick the ball up. Kamada gets the ball in here. You can see Munoz goes flying around the right-hand side. The ball goes back into Mateta, who does really well, eventually finds the overlapping wing-back. Crystal Palace get themselves into the final third. The ball into the box is amazing. Mateta runs across the front post, taking the centre-backs with him, opening up this space for Eze to step onto the ball, and the finish is absolutely brilliant. Does this classify as a smash and grab from Crystal Palace? I think it just about does, because it was a very defensive performance that relied on transitional moments and also riding their luck a little bit. But if that's what you've got to do to get a win, that's what you do to get the win. Glasner does not deserve any criticism for that. A lot of people want to see total football and things like that, but it's not possible for every team in every game to do that. The job of a manager and a football team is to go out and win the football match, particularly in a cup final. The most important thing is the result, not how easy on the eye the performance was. So Glasner got this spot on, and also got a little bit of luck with just an amazing performance from Dean Henderson and the centre-backs in front of them. I think Crystal Palace, generally speaking, were amazing. City were also pretty good, by the way. Another day, City might score 2 or 3 goals. It was a really, really good FA Cup final. I personally loved it. And yeah, so happy for Crystal Palace fans. If you are a Crystal Palace fan, get in the comments down below and let me know. Is that your happiest day as a football fan? I dare say you've had some good moments in your time, but that has got to be right up there, because that was special. The atmosphere after the game as well seemed absolutely electric, and during the game as well, to be fair. So fair play to Crystal Palace. Deserved, I think. Deserved FA Cup winners just because of the way that they did it. It almost felt like it was meant to happen as we were watching that game. Crystal Palace got their win. Fair play to them. For Manchester City, a disappointing end to a rather disappointing season. It's also the end of this video. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, get notifications on, all of that good stuff. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.